Welcome to It's a Grand Life. Did you know that in the United States alone, 2.4 million kids are being raised by their grandparents or other family members other than mom or dad? 2.4 million. It's a Grand Life is a podcast for those grandparents and kinship caregivers who are committed to making a difference for those kids. Grand families are in every neighborhood, every city, tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hello, this is Craig Nash, and we'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And I know you're going to enjoy our program today. We have an advocate for grand families from California. Bob Ruble is with us, and he is also a kinship caregiver. So everything he shares is absolutely and unequivocally from his personal passion on what we're doing. And I know you're going to be blessed by our discussion today. Bob, welcome to It's a Grand Life. Great to have you.
Welcome. Thank you for this invitation. This is great.
Now, how long have you been a kinship caregiver?
Well, you know, it's funny because I just was cleaning my office up and I just came across my placement paperwork. So on November 27th of 2002, I signed a piece of paper that I didn't know what I was signing. I just signed it. And that was in 2002 to be able to bring my niece home from, she was in custody, congregate care, to bring her home. So if we do the math, it's 21 years maybe. Does that sound about right?
21 years.
21 years is when my life changed with this.
And what was that like? You know, where your life took totally upside down, right? Did you have other kids at home or anything like that?
So I was married, and my wife and I, my wife worked for an airline, so we did lots of traveling. We went around the globe a few times, and we just never really sat down and talked about having biological children.
Right.
So that's kind of this. Obviously, this was kind of a whole change in my whole life. I didn't have any of these responsibilities. I could pick up and go. I could, I had a business I was running, but completely changed because I didn't know how to. The only parenting skills I had was just common sense and maybe possibly taking the bad things out of what I learned as a child and trying to apply them. Well,
that is quite a curveball, and I didn't know that you and your wife at the time could travel anywhere, and they had this as long as the business was taken care of, you're on a plane and you're out of here, and so that was an amazing change for you and your wife. And so you have been caregiving for 21 years. Now, this was your niece, right?
Yes. My sister's child, my sister's only child.
And does your niece still live with you, or is she off on her own now?
Well, she's back. Let's just say that. She's been on her own. She's back. She struggled a little bit. The safety net's here. It's always a safety net, but as age progresses, the requirements of that safety net change. Of course, I have to change them because I need my sanity too.
Right. And so she's a normal kid. Like, kids leave and then sometimes they come back, and that's very prevalent in our culture. And so what would you say has been, in your opinion, the biggest hurdle to becoming a kinship caregiver, besides giving up all the travel?
I squeeze that in every once in a while when I can. She's old enough now I can leave her at home and not get in trouble. So
that's absolutely great.
For me, when I go back to the beginning, was the first challenge, first hurdle, the first thing I ran into was, what is the child welfare system? What is that? I didn't know it existed. I knew that it was put into place after my generation or two generations after me to protect innocent children, which is great. But I had I tell this story, they didn't give me a manual when I came to pick her up. They gave me a young girl I barely knew with clothes that they had given her because hers were not appropriate. And that was it. I didn't get anything. So the hardest thing would have been no education, no orientation. What do I do if I need to do this? Who is this calling me? What are my obligations other than this piece of paper here, which, you need the magnifying glass to read. So I just went into the mode of normalize the child the best that I can, make her feel comfortable. Like I said, I didn't have a relationship really with her, make her safe,
Right.
and try to get her back to going to school and things like that. So that was the hardest thing. And then the second hardest thing would be when I did need, I'll say tools. People say training. I dislike the word training. I like the word education. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what existed. It was in our county at that time. It was completely fragmented. You had this over here, you had that over there, you had this down here, and this up there. There was no way. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what I needed. I had no idea.
So
those are the two hardest things.
Bob, how old was your niece when she came to live with you guys?
She was 8 years old.
8 years old. Okay, so she'd had some kindergarten and some years at school and what have you, and
yeah,
and
yes.
In our granddaughter's situation, she was being pulled all over the place, and with her mother at the time, and there was some substance abuse and some behavioral health issues going on, and there was a lack of stability in her life, and it took about a year for things to calm down, and now it's really pretty calm, and she's got friends and what have you. Did you find the same thing, that it took a while with your niece to really get acclimated to her new aunt and uncle, who are now quasi mom and dad, and then she got in the flow of things like a normal 8-year-old?
Yeah, it definitely took a while. The first night was pretty shocking because she did not know how to take care of herself after a bowel movement. She just didn't have that skill at 8 years old. And it makes me cry when I think about that, because my sister never applied any of that. There was various reasons, because she wanted the child's urine for nefarious purposes, of course, and that was really a sad thing to see an 8-year-old do. But luckily, I was married. My wife was here. She was able to help with some of those things, because a male getting with a small female and an uncle, that's a whole different.
Right.
I probably got that target there, but anyway, so that was something that really shocked me. So it took time. It did take time. I can say it now, I won't get in trouble, but she didn't sleep in a bed for almost 3 months.
Wow.
First night, obviously, she slept with my wife. I slept in the spare room. We tried to set her up a room, and she couldn't do it. So I would sleep in the bed in her room, for obviously she needed some sort of feeling of safety. And she slept on the floor with my dog. And back in those days, it was probably, oh my gosh, he's got her sleeping on the floor.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, did you not see where she just came from and what she was doing there? So, but eventually, I got her reading, getting stuff like that. She fell asleep in the bed one night, and I let it go and never looked back. And but it did take a while. Just things like that. Always wanted to be standing by us. Wanted to know that we're here and not whatever my sister was doing. So, but it did take a while.
So there was some abandonment issues, it sounds like that.
Yeah, and that really comes out later on as she starts to grow up. But yeah, there were things like that. Without going into great detail, my sister would take off, be gone for a couple days. She would also take my niece's name, as I don't mind saying it. I've already got approval from her. Her name is Kendra. She would take off, and then they would be worried, or her biological father was supposed to come, and she'd be waiting on the curb all day, and he'd never show up because my sister wanted money from him, and he didn't come because it was an absolute. This is a podcast, right? So it was an absolute. Cut this out of. It was a shit fest. I don't know how else to say it.
Yes, that
you can absolutely cut it out.
And unfortunately, my friend, myself, and what you've gone through, and all of our colleagues that I'm meeting at Generations United, we sing from the same hymnal. We are pulling
Mhm.
folks out of the most difficult situations because there's so much love in our hearts, and we want a stable life for our nieces, our grandkids, and our grandsons, and what have you. And I just commend you for doing that. And I know that you've got this other side of your life now where you are not only an advocate for your niece, you're an advocate for all kids in California that are part of the grand family or kinship circumstances, and but you had to live it firsthand to really, I would imagine, get a feel for how bad things are.
Yeah, absolutely. And just take a moment to thank you as well, because I know you're involved with this and you've accepted, I believe it's your granddaughter.
Yes.
Is that
Mhm.
correct? And sounds like we've had some similar things. Your daughter and my sister, and we can't really get into all that right now. We'd have to have 5 hours, but yeah. So I'm sorry, I lost my track. I wanted to make sure I got the end. What was your question again?
No,
I'm so
the
sorry.
it just how we've had similar paths, and
Mhm.
when we have and you've been part of the Generations United Grand Family, I mean, Grand Voices for years. I'm really new to it, but we're not alone when we get on the call,
Wow.
and so when we've got our listeners listening to this podcast all over the country. Bob's story and my story is probably similar to your story, Grandma and Grandpa, if you're listening in, or kinship caregiver, and we just want you to know, especially Bob, all the years he's put in, we are here for you, and we are behind what you're doing, and you're not alone, and you can get through it. And but it is a challenge. And Bob's got 21 years of fighting the good fight in support of his niece, and what a difference you have made, I'm sure, in her life. If you can imagine what it would be like if aunt and uncle weren't there, and and is that what makes you so passionate about your role as an advocate for grand families and kinship caregivers?
I think my passion began when I realized how difficult it was to navigate and can figure out what the system is and the things I needed to educate myself. And I realized that there's got to be somebody out there that's maybe, quite a bit older than me, maybe doesn't have the, I don't want to use the word social skills, but skills to be able to call somebody, ask for an answer, demand an answer, instead of just hanging up and say, okay, well, that's the way it is. And I started thinking about those people that just call, nobody calls them back. So be it. Obviously I was a different person because of the way I am personally. So I think that that was the part that really made me as far as passionate. And then there was an incident that happened one time when I actually had taken my niece in to see her social worker, and I witnessed an experience with a couple that a couple, I should say, children that came to to visit their child that was removed at birth, and they had, obviously it was in a secure area and they couldn't have the child. And I remember looking at the baby come out, beautiful little baby, and they're interacting with it, and I'm thinking to myself, these parents are still children,
Right.
and what I can't see where they came from. I don't know if their lives were difficult and didn't have those paths, but I thought to myself, I know my niece is only, I think what you wanted to ask me about this, my niece is just one person.
Right.
And I thought to myself, if I can somehow alter her destiny, if it were a destiny, and and get her to the point where it breaks that cycle of my sister, which was followed by my mother, or previous with my mother, then I have a success. I have one success, but one is huge, because she could have developed into 3 or 4 children, and it could have been
Right.
crazy. So, and that just all goes back to somebody wanting to think how I can, what I can do to change it, or what my thoughts are on it, because it was not, this is an innocent little baby, my
100%. Right.
sweet little innocent niece, 8 years old. Man, stop
And
it, with your grandchild.
Exactly, and your heart goes out to them. But you touched on something that I was going to ask you about. And anytime you send an email, it says break the cycle. And then you are quite passionate about that. When you mean breaking the cycle, you're talking about grandma and daughter, and then you don't want the granddaughter to fall in the same sequence that the previous two generations had. And I love that, and it just it really speaks to what we're trying to do, and change the whole approach to all these kinship caregiving relationships, and grandparents stepping in for parents. We want to break that cycle, and we want to support the kids any way we can so they can have a normal life in today's society. And then, once you get them stabilized, then you got to deal with all the devices they use and everything else, and deal with all the social media and what have you. So, what would you say what is your favorite part? What was your favorite part of raising your niece?
Sorry, this is difficult. When she graduated from high school, that was my minimum goal, to make sure that happened, not be in trouble, pregnant, drugs, all that kind of stuff, was just to get to that point, because nobody could take that away from her ever.
Right.
And she turned 18 30 days after she graduated, and I thought, well, if she leaves, she leaves, but she leaves with that.
Right.
And that was one of that. And then of course we went into college, which had never been in the wheelhouse at all at the beginning. But so the proud things that she's accomplished, not without any pushing and shoving and kicking along the way, but she
like
did
a normal kid, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't graduate high school for her. I didn't go to attend the college classes. She did. Did I drive her there and tell her to get out and go to class? Yes, but I didn't do the work. So to me, those were at this point, to this day, the happiest things. I don't know what the future's going to hold. So,
right. And nowadays, folks change their job every 1 or 2 years, it seems like. So where she starts now, who knows where she'll end up? But
right.
So what would you say was the biggest challenge for you and your wife, when you took in your niece and tried to give her this stability, and after you got her acclimated?
So obviously the difficult part was trying to understand the system. To me, if you asked me a week before that, well, what is a foster parent? I'd say, well, that's somebody that takes kids in for money. That was my on the street construction worker type of thought. I didn't have any knowledge of anything like that. And then just trying to understand how the system's going to navigate. I didn't know that there's a legal time frame for reunification. There's nothing. They didn't give me anything. And all of that stuff had to be self-learned, or you just ran into it and then you tried to figure it out. Probably the next difficult thing was, we were doing really well. Unfortunately, my wife and I separated. It wasn't anything to do with my niece. We were having some difficulties before, and when she informed me of that, I thought, that's it. They're not going to leave her with a 40-year-old man.
Right.
They're just not going to do it. And the social worker sat me down and said, you're probably one of the best people. And I'm not tooting my own horn, but she says, you've taken an active role where normally it's the female in the grandmother or the aunt.
Right.
And there's no way I would ever recommend. In fact, I'll fight for her to stay. Of course, she had, when they had their private sessions, my niece said, I want to stay. I don't want to go back to this, or I don't want to go to a home that people I don't know.
Right.
So that, being able to get past that and know that, hey, I'm an uncle, so what? I can still do the things that I need to do. And when we run into the female-oriented things, I not hire people, but I find people, and I come up with ways to get around it. I always tell people, because I was just here in the state of California, and I was kind of explaining my story, and I was sitting in the room and I looked around again, and this happens probably 9 times out of 10, maybe even more. I'm the only male in there. And what I mean by male is, I'm not going to get into the pronoun stuff or all that stuff. I'm just saying I was the only guy in there, and I look different.
Right.
However, what's coming out of my voice is the same as all you other you other people. We all have that same passion. So that was difficult, I think, overcoming the stigma of being a male in a predominantly a woman raises the child. I mean, I don't know how else.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm facing that as I go to my granddaughter's elementary school, or if we go to field trips, and it's all the moms, and then the brownies is led by the moms, and all those things, and it's but we're not there for popularity, right? We're there for our niece and our granddaughter.
Yeah.
And
I always thought that was a tough one, because I had they had a what did they have? They had like a, I don't know, something, and I couldn't do it because I was a male. And that was frustrating. Even though I could straighten hair like the best of them, I couldn't do that. But if you flip the script, a woman can take a boy, and do all those different things. So it was tough. It was tough always thinking about that. And I'm sure you're going to encounter things. You're walking out of the school and you're holding, I don't know how old your granddaughter is, but you're holding hands and walking out to the car. Like, one day somebody may stop you. And that's why, I don't know if you can see this. I carried this. This is my, you can't see it, but I'll explain it. It is my guardianship paper.
Right.
That was folded in my wallet. I don't know if you can see it.
No, it's
ripped
so
completely. Like I have other copies, but this is the one that was always in my pocket. And I did get questioned one time, and I had this. And
that's I never thought of that, but because the elementary school where my granddaughter goes, everybody knows us. We
sure.
Before before we became guardians, we weren't allowed to even know what the homework assignments were, or to talk to the teachers, or when. And we had half days, like today. My granddaughter has a half day. We didn't know when the half days were, and the other parents were going, "Man, these people are irresponsible. They don't know anything." But it was because the mom was gone, and we weren't in the queue. And now with the guardianship being formalized, we met with the principal and the administrators. They were absolutely terrific, and we've just seen a lot of stability there, so. So in my last question on this podcast, before we're going to have you come back again and talk about your role as the advocate, because that is just so encouraging to folks that, like me, I'm brand new at this, and I want to find out how do you go to the state capitol and make a difference. But what would you say is what are the three things that you wish you knew prior to taking responsibility of raising your niece? And would you recommend, Bob, the role for folks that are not grandparents, or would you recommend, as the uncle or the aunt, or even the close family friend, the uncle, would you recommend these folks step into a kinship role?
The first thing that I'll answer the first part. The first thing that I wish I would have known, the most immediate important thing that I think anybody can learn, what is trauma? I got a pair of reading glasses on, you got reading glasses on, but my lenses could not see the trauma. I didn't, and that's because I didn't understand. I realized my niece came in here with a suitcase full of stuff that I had no idea what would be. So to me, that's really important. And trauma, to me, previous to that, trauma was, you're playing out there, you're playing softball, and you get hit in the back with a baseball,
right?
A softball. That's traumatic. You didn't realize that some of the things that happen to a child growing up in their say the word right, impression, whatever that is, that word, you probably get a better word at that.
Impressionable,
yeah. That all these things were affecting this child and doing all that. So to me, trauma, and then it can come in different forms for everybody. I mean, my niece had the worst part of the trauma with some physical things that happened to her. Some people just have it different, but it all comes back. I mean, I'm sure your granddaughter, I don't know what the relationship is, but I'm sure that's traumatic for her not to be with her mom.
Oh,
even though it's not safe to do so.
Right.
So trauma, I think, was the number one. Was that all you asked me on that one?
That was great. And the other question was, would you recommend this role to other individuals, because there's a huge need for children like your niece and my granddaughter to have stability in their home. Would you encourage folks that are uncles and aunts and maybe so close to the family they're uncles but not from a documentation standpoint? Would you recommend that folks step into this role for the joy of seeing their lives change?
Well, for me personally, and as I learned over time, is that children do better when they're connected to family. Um, because of the way it worked with me, I was able to have her connected to her mom and oversee this, and I could have her access to her grandfather. So she never went and stayed in a stranger's home, with the exception of the 3 times that she went into congregate care for a couple of days. So I would say, to be honest with you, I went into this thinking this was a temporary gig. As soon as they do this and they do that, boom. Well, it didn't turn into that at all. So I would recommend that. Yeah, I think it's great for the child to have that family connection, because they always do better, I believe. I think statistics show that as well. And they need to educate themselves. And if they can get through that, educate them, meaning be able to learn, not
Right.
be and complain all the time, and just try to understand that this is a child you're caring for and put that as a priority. I think it's a very good thing. I never thought I would say that, and it scares me to say it, but if it happened tomorrow, I'd probably do the same thing.
I'm
Even
sure
all
you
the
would.
bumps and scars and all that stuff along the way. I mean, because it's something that possibly I had a higher up person preparing me for all my life to be able to do something like that.
Yep, and
I
without a
think
doubt.
it's rewarding. It's rewarding.
Well, we want to thank you so much for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life, Bob Ruble, and we're going to have you back next week. Today we were talking about Bob, the kinship caregiver. Next week we're going to talk about the advocate and what he does at the capital of California, and how he advocates for grand families and kinship caregivers. So, Bob, thanks so much for being our guest, and we look forward to seeing you next time on It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.